Evelyn Harper stood in the doorway of her hotel room, suitcase in hand, staring at the neatly made bed and quiet space that now belonged only to her. She had never traveled alone before. Every trip she had taken in her 68 years was with her husband. Thomas, her travel partner, her laughter, her calm. But now, a year after he was gone, Evelyn decided to do something she hadn't done since losing him: go somewhere new. She booked a small lakeside hotel in Vermont, hoping the still water and autumn air might help her find the peace she had lost. The moment she stepped inside, a wave of silence greeted her. The room smelled of cedar and clean sheets. There was one armchair near the window, a soft lamp beside it, and a view of the lake that shimmered under the setting sun. Evelyn put her bag down and let out a shaky breath. She wasn't sure if she felt brave or broken. Maybe both. She ran her hand over the window frame, whispering softly, "You'd like this place." "Thomas?" The sound of her voice, small and fragile, was swallowed by the quiet for months after his passing. Everyone had told her to stay strong or keep busy, but no one really understood how heavy quietness could be. Her house had become a museum of memories, his old books still stacked near the chair he used to sit in, his coat still hanging by the door. She hadn't been able to put it away. That's why she came here. She needed distance from the reminders just for a few days to see if her heart still remembered how to live on its own. As the sun dropped lower, Evelyn decided to go downstairs for dinner. The hotel's cafe was small and warm, with a faint smell of coffee and fresh bread. A few other guests were there, couples, mostly, talking softly over their meals. She sat near the corner, ordered tea, and watched the golden light fade outside the window. When her tea arrived, an older man at a nearby table smiled kindly. He looked about her age, with gentle blue eyes and silver hair that caught the light. "Evening," said, his voice deep but friendly. "You're not from around here, are you?" Evelyn smiled politely. "No, just visiting for the weekend." "Same here," he said. "I'm Richard." Something about his calm tone made her feel at ease. They started talking at first, just polite conversation about the weather, then slowly about their lives. He was from Boston, visiting his daughter who lived nearby. He mentioned he had lost his wife years ago, and there was a quiet understanding in his eyes when he said it. Evelyn didn't have to explain her own story. He seemed to know. They laughed about small things, how hotel pillows were always too soft, how travel never felt the same as it used to. Richard told her about his garden back home, how he still grew roses because his wife loved them. Evelyn found herself smiling, even laughing softly, something she hadn't done in a long while. The conversation felt natural, like two people gently stepping into the light after a long time in the dark. When she finally looked at the time, 2 hours had passed. "I should get some rest," she said, standing up. "Of course," Richard replied, smiling. "Maybe I'll see you at breakfast." Back in her room, Evelyn sat by the window, tea still warm in her hands. Outside, the moon reflected off the lake like silver glass. She looked at this small photo of Thomas she had placed on the bedside table. "You'd laugh," she whispered softly. "You'd say, 'I can't go anywhere without talking to strangers.'" Her voice trembled with a mix of sadness and fondness, but she felt something she hadn't in months: a lightness. Not happiness, not yet, but the first quiet spark of it. She wasn't sure what it meant. She wasn't looking for anything, certainly not romance. It was just nice. Nice to be seen, to talk, to remember that life was still out there, waiting to be lived. That night, Evelyn couldn't fall asleep right away. The walls of the hotel seemed to hum softly with the sound of the night outside: crickets, the distant car, the faint rush of the lake breeze. She thought about how strange it felt to be alone, but not lonely. For the first time, she realized that loneliness wasn't always about being by yourself. It was about feeling forgotten. And tonight, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel forgotten, lying in bed. She remembered the way Richard had talked about his wife, the way he had smiled when she mentioned her favorite tea, and the way he didn't rush the conversation. He had an easy patience that made her feel safe. She wondered if she'd see him again tomorrow, and then caught herself smiling at the thought. She reached over, turned off the lamp, and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "I'm still here," she whispered into the dark, her voice steady this time. "I'm still me." In the stillness, she felt a strange sense of peace, like a small door had opened inside her heart, letting in a bit of air, a bit of light. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, that was enough. Morning light poured into the room when she woke. The world outside looked fresh, painted in soft gold. The hotel felt different, now less lonely, more like a quiet companion. Evelyn made herself a cup of tea from the small kettle by the counter and stepped to the window again. The lake was calm, glimmering in the early sun. For a moment, she just stood there, taking it all in. She thought of how far she had come from the woman who couldn't leave her house without breaking down, to the woman now standing in a hotel room alone, finding her way back to herself. She still missed Thomas, and she always would. But maybe missing him didn't mean she had to stop living. When she went downstairs for breakfast, she spotted Richard sitting near the window, sketching something in a notebook. He looked up, saw her, and smiled. Evelyn smiled back, and for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel like a widow. She just felt like Evelyn. And as she sat down across from him, the quiet rhythm of a new beginning began to unfold softly, gently, just like the sunrise outside. It was still early, but she could tell something inside her had shifted. She didn't know what would happen next or whether she'd ever see Richard again after this trip. But she knew one thing for sure. She had taken the first real step forward, and for now, that was all she needed. The next morning, Evelyn woke early, feeling strangely rested. The golden light of the Vermont sun spilled through the curtains, painting the room in warmth. She opened the window, letting in the cool breeze from the lake. It carried the soft scent of pine and damp earth. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wanted to step outside, not out of duty, but because she was curious about what the day might bring. After breakfast, she decided to walk along the lake. The path was quiet, lined with tall trees shedding golden leaves. Birds fluttered through the branches, and the soft sound of water touching the shore filled the air. She walked slowly, taking in every sound, every color. It felt peaceful, almost like nature was reminding her that beauty still existed. Even after loss, as she rounded a corner, she noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench, sketching in a small notebook. It was Richard. He looked up, surprised but pleased to see her. "Good morning, Evelyn," he said with a smile. "Looks like we both had the same idea." Evelyn laughed softly. "Seems like it. The view is too lovely to miss." He gestured to the bench beside him. "Care to join me?" She sat down, and they watched the sunlight shimmer across the water. He was sketching the lake, the trees, and a small boat tied to the dock. His hands were steady, graceful. "You draw beautifully," Evelyn said. He shrugged lightly. "Just a hobby. Helps me quiet my thoughts." He paused, then looked at her kindly. "You remind me of my wife, Margaret. She used to say the same thing. She'd always find beauty in little things, like reflections in the water or the way sunlight hits leaves." Evelyn smiled faintly. "She sounds lovely," Swazi said softly. "It took me years to learn how to live without her. But one day I realized love doesn't disappear, just changes shape." His words lingered in the air, gentle but powerful. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the ripples on the lake. It was like he had voiced something she had never dared to say aloud. They walked together after that, slowly along the lakeside path. They talked about their families, their lives, and all the little things that made up their worlds. Richard told her about his daughter and 2 grandkids. Evelyn talked about her daughter Emily and her 6-year-old grandson Liam, who had her late husband's smile. At one point, Richard stopped by a small cafe near the edge of town and suggested they grab lunch. They sat by the window, eating sandwiches and laughing about how both of them preferred tea over coffee. Evelyn found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone since Thomas passed away. She told him about the nights when silence in her house felt heavier than grief itself, and how she sometimes still caught herself talking to her husband's photograph. Richard listened quietly, never judging, never interrupting, When she apologized for talking too much, he chuckled. Don't? It's good to talk about the people we love. That's how we keep them alive. Those words warmed her heart. She looked at him, noticing the kindness in his eyes, the kind of kindness that comes from someone who has known loss but learned how to live with it. There was no awkwardness, no pretense. It's just two souls finding a bit of comfort in shared silence as the afternoon turned golden. They walked back to the hotel together. The air grew cooler, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot echoed around them. When they reached the lobby, Richard smiled and said, "I hope I'll see you tomorrow." Evelyn smiled back. "I think you just might." Later that evening, Evelyn returned to her room, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She sat by the window, watching the reflection of the moon on the lake. It was so quiet that she could hear the faint hum of crickets outside. Her phone buzzed a message from her daughter. "Emily." It was a short video from Liam. Evelyn tapped it open, expecting one of his usual funny updates. But instead, she saw him sitting on his bed, holding a drawing in his small hands. His blonde hair was messy, his eyes bright. "Hi, Grandma," he said cheerfully. "Mommy said you're staying at a hotel. I drew you and Grandpa in the sky. See?" He lifted the paper, a crayon drawing of her standing under the sun and a smiling figure with angel wings above her. "Grandpa said it's okay for you to smile again," he added seriously. "He told me in my dream last night." Evelyn froze, her breath catching. She replayed the video twice, then a third time. Liam's voice was innocent, but his words hit her deep. She felt tears gather in her eyes. She hadn't told anyone about the guilt she carried that moving on felt like betraying Thomas. But her grandson's words cut through that pain like sunlight breaking through clouds. She put the phone down, pressing her hand to her heart. Maybe Thomas did want her to smile again. Maybe the people we lose never really leave. They just find new ways to reach us. That thought stayed with her all evening. She opened her photo album, the one she always traveled with, and looked at Thomas's picture. "You always believed in signs," she whispered. Maybe this was one of them. She remembered something Richard said earlier, that love doesn't disappear, it changes shape. Maybe that's what was happening now. Maybe love was changing shape once again. Not fading, but transforming into something softer. Something that would allow her to live without losing what she had. Evelyn went to bed with a quiet peace in her heart. She thought about Richard's gentle smile, about Liam's sweet voice, and about Thomas, her forever love, who still seemed to be guiding her, even from somewhere beyond. The next morning, she woke early again. The world outside was painted gold and pink. She decided to walk by the lake once more. When she reached the same bench where she'd met Richard, she saw a few fallen leaves and smiled to herself. She didn't know if she'd see him again that day, but she felt grateful for yesterday, for the laughter, for the conversation, for the reminder that she was still alive. As she walked back to the hotel, she noticed a family playing near the shore, a young mother, a father, and a little boy running after ducks. The boy's laughter filled the air, light and full of life. Evelyn stopped to watch, and for the first time, she didn't feel the ache of missing Thomas. Instead, she felt his love in that laughter, in the sunlight, in the quiet strength of her own heart. When she returned to her room, she played Liam's video once more. She smiled through her tears as she whispered, "You were right, sweetheart. Grandpa would want me to smile." She looked out the window again. The lake sparkled in the distance, calm and endless. For the first time since her husband's passing, Evelyn didn't feel like she was running from pain. She felt like she was walking toward peace. The message from her grandson had changed something inside her. It was simple, pure, and full of love. Those few innocent words had given her what she'd been searching for all along: permission to live again. That night, back in her cozy hotel room, Evelyn couldn't fall asleep. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and calm, yet her heart felt restless. Liam's video replayed in her mind, his small, serious voice saying, "Grandpa says it's okay to smile again." Those words had unlocked something deep inside her, something she had kept buried under quiet grief. She sat up, switched on the small lamp by the bed, and reached for a piece of hotel stationery. The paper was thick, clean, and smooth under her fingertips. She hesitated, then began to write. "My dearest Thomas," she wrote slowly. "I met someone today who reminded me of you not because he looks like you, but because he made me laugh again. His name is Richard. He told me love never disappears. It only changes shape. For the first time since you've been gone. I think I understand what that means." Her handwriting wobbled as tears filled her eyes. She paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "I'll always love you, but I think maybe I can love life too. I thought moving on would mean leaving you behind. But maybe it means carrying you with me just in a lighter way." When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and slipped it inside her old photo album. She didn't know if she'd ever show it to anyone, but it felt right to write it, like setting something free. The next morning, she woke early and went down for breakfast. The dining room was quiet, filled with the smell of pancakes and coffee. To her surprise, Richard was sitting by the window, sketchbook open beside a steaming cup of tea. He looked up and smiled warmly when he saw her. "Good morning, Evelyn." "Good morning," she said, taking the seat across from him. "You're up early." "Old habits," he chuckled. "My body still thinks it's time to get up and feed the cat." They laughed, the kind of easy laughter that fills the empty spaces between two people who understand each other's silences. Over breakfast, they talked about small things, favorite books, travel stories, funny memories from their younger days. But underneath the light conversation was something deeper. A quiet comfort that neither of them tried to name. When breakfast ended, Richard closed his sketchbook and hesitated. "I'm heading home to Boston today," he said. Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. "Already?" He nodded. "I promised my daughter I'd help her fix a fence this weekend. But," he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Before I go, I wanted to give you this." He handed her the page from his sketchbook, the drawing of the lake they had admired together. It was beautifully detailed, with sunlight reflected in the water and gentle ripples across the surface. In one corner, he had written, "For Evelyn, because even the sunset begins again each morning." Evelyn stared at the drawing, speechless. Her throat tightened and she looked up at him. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." He smiled softly. "You reminded me that hope isn't something we lose, it's something we choose. So, thank you." They stood near the lobby after breakfast, exchanging a quiet goodbye. There was no dramatic moment, no promise or regret, just a shared understanding. Sometimes people meet at just the right moment to remind each other how to keep living. After he left, Evelyn went back to her room. The space felt emptier than before, but not in a sad way. She placed the sketch on the table beside her photo of Thomas, smiling through the faint ache in her heart. Then she packed her suitcase, ready to go home. Before leaving, she sat by the window one last time. The lake shimmered under the sunlight, calm and endless. She took out the letter she had written the night before and read it again, her heart full. She thought about how far she had come in just a few days. When she arrived, she had been lost in her grief, afraid to let go. But now, she felt something new, a quiet peace. On her way out, she stopped by the front desk to check out. The young woman behind the counter smiled. "Did you enjoy your stay, ma'am?" Evelyn smiled back. "Yes," she said softly. "It was exactly what I needed." The drive home was peaceful. The countryside rolled by, golden fields fading into soft hills. She played the radio softly, humming along to an old song she and Thomas used to love. For once, the memories didn't sting, they felt warm, comforting, alive. When she reached home, the familiar sight of her little white house didn't bring the usual ache. She carried her bags inside, took off her coat, and placed Richard's sketch on the mantel beside a framed photo of her and Thomas on their wedding day. The two images looked right together, past and present, side by side. That evening, she brewed herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, just like she had at the hotel. The neighborhood was quiet, the air cool. Somewhere down the street, she could hear children laughing. She smiled, thinking of Liam. His sweet little message had been the start of all this. It's a thing that gave her courage to face her loneliness. Later, she took out her journal and began writing again, not to Thomas this time, but to herself. She wrote about the lake, about Richard's kind eyes, about how strange it felt to laugh again without guilt. She wrote that she finally understood what love meant. It wasn't about holding on forever, but about learning when to let the heart breathe. As the sky darkened, she opened her window and felt the night breeze brush her face. It carried the faint scent of rain. Somewhere inside her, she felt Thomas close, not in the way she used to imagine, but softer, calmer, like a memory that smiled back. The next morning, Evelyn woke early and went for a walk around her garden. The roses were still blooming, even though autumn had nearly arrived. She knelt to touch one, smiling. Thomas used to say roses were stubborn, they bloomed even when the weather turned cold. Maybe she was the same. Later that day, her daughter Emily called. "Mom, Liam wants to talk to you," she said, passing the phone. "Hi, Grandma." Liam's cheerful voice rang through. "Did you see my drawing again?" "I did," she said, smiling. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Did Grandpa tell you to smile?" he asked seriously. Evelyn felt her eyes sting. "Yes," she said softly. "He did. Through you." After the call ended, she sat back in her chair, holding the phone to her chest. Life wasn't perfect, and she still missed Thomas deeply, but she no longer felt trapped by that sadness. Love had found a new shape through her grandson's innocent words, through a stranger's kindness, through her own courage to live again. That night, she opened the sketch one more time before bed. The lake scene glowed gently under the lamplight, a reminder of peace and renewal. Beneath the drawing, she placed the letter she had written to Thomas. It felt like closing a chapter, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. As she turned off the light, she whispered into the dark, "Good night, my love. I'll keep smiling for both of us." And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn slept soundly, her heart lighter, her dreams full of warmth, and her spirit quietly free. Evelyn drove home from the hotel with a peaceful heart. The road wound through golden fields and sleepy little towns, the autumn trees glowing like fire. She hummed softly to the radio, the sound of her own voice surprising her. For months, her drives had been quiet, filled only with the echo of her thoughts. But now, the silence felt warm instead of heavy. By the time she reached her street, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange light across the neighborhood. She parked in front of her white house, her heart calm in a way it hadn't been since Thomas passed. When she stepped inside, the smell of home wrapped around her: lavender soap, old books, and the faint trace of Thomas's aftershave she still kept on the shelf. She set her suitcase down, then looked around. Everything was the same: the family pictures, the wooden clock that ticked softly, but she felt different. The weight she had carried for so long had eased. She took out Richard's sketch of the lake and placed it beside Thomas's photo on the mantel. The two images, one of the past, one of a new beginning, looked right together. She smiled, touching the frame gently. The next morning, her daughter Emily called. "Mom, are you home safe?" "Yes, sweetheart," Evelyn replied. "The trip was wonderful." "Peaceful, really? That's good," Emily said with relief. "Liam has been talking about you non-stop. He made you another drawing." Evelyn laughed softly. "That boy could open an art gallery. Come over for lunch tomorrow," Emily said. "He'll be thrilled." The following day, Evelyn drove to Emily's house. The front yard was full of fallen leaves, and she could hear laughter from inside before she even knocked. The door swung open, and Liam ran out, his small arms wrapping tightly around her legs. "Grandma," he shouted, grinning wide. Evelyn bent down, hugging him close. "Oh, I missed you, sweetheart." He held up a drawing. This one showed her standing under a rainbow with Thomas smiling from the clouds. "See?" he said proudly. "You're smiling now. Grandpa told me you would." Evelyn's breath caught. "He told you that?" Liam nodded with complete seriousness. He said, "Tell Grandma she's still my sunshine, but she has to shine for herself now." The words hit her straight in the heart. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. Emily, standing nearby, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He said that last night," Emily whispered. "He woke up and told me right away." Evelyn knelt and cupped Liam's face in her hands. "You're my little messenger, aren't you?" she said, her voice trembling. He smiled, not fully understanding the weight of what he'd said, just happy that his grandma was smiling again. Evelyn kissed his forehead, feeling warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel torn between the past and the present. She felt whole. That afternoon, they all sat together on the porch. Emily poured tea while Liam ran around the yard, pretending to chase butterflies. Evelyn told her daughter about the lake, about meeting Richard, and how much peace she had found. Emily listened, nodding. "I'm glad you went," she said softly. "Dad would have wanted that." "I think he did," Evelyn replied. "In a way, I think he sent me there." Later, when the sky turned pink, Evelyn watched the sun dip behind the trees. The sound of her grandson's laughter filled the air, and for once, she didn't feel the sharp ache that usually came with moments like this. She felt Thomas's presence, not as a shadow, but as a gentle, warm something that lived inside her, guiding her quietly forward. That evening, back at her house, she made herself a simple dinner and turned on the radio. The same song she and Thomas had danced to on their wedding night began to play. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she closed her eyes and smiled. "You were right," she whispered. "Love doesn't end, just changes." She lit a candle near his photo, then picked up the letter she had written in the hotel. Reading it again, she realized she didn't feel the same pain she had when she wrote it. It had turned into gratitude for the years they had, for the love that still lived on, and for the courage to keep living. She placed the letter under the sketch of the lake, then sat by the window, sipping her tea outside. The first stars appeared. The world felt alive, full of small miracles she had forgotten how to see. She thought of Richard and wondered if he had gone back to his garden, maybe sketching again. She smiled, knowing that people crossed paths for reasons they often couldn't explain. Some left footprints, others left lessons. Richard had given her both days turned into weeks. Evelyn returned to her routines, tending to her small garden, reading in the afternoons, calling Emily every night. But something was new now. She laughed more easily, smiled without guilt, and even started painting again. Something she hadn't done since Thomas passed. She painted sunsets, lakes, and quiet roads, places that reminded her of peace. One weekend, Emily and Liam came to visit. Liam ran to her studio, pointing at one of her paintings. "Grandma, that looks like the lake." Evelyn nodded. "It is, sweetheart. I painted it from memory. It's beautiful," he said proudly. "Grandpa would love it." Evelyn hugged him tightly. "I think he does, Liam. I think he does." That night, after they left, she stepped outside and looked at the stars. The sky was clear and the air smelled of autumn leaves. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Thomas, for loving me then, and for letting me love life now." The wind rustled the trees as if in reply. Evelyn smiled and went back inside, feeling his love not as a memory, but as a presence gentle, constant, eternal. Months later, she decided to return to the same hotel in Vermont. She packed light this time, no tears, no hesitation. When she arrived, the lake looked the same, calm and endless. She sat on the same bench where she had once met Richard. The air was cool, but her heart was warm. She took out a small notebook and began to write again, not to Thomas this time, but to herself. "Dear Evelyn," she wrote, "you did it. You learned to live again. You learned that grief doesn't indict, becomes part of you. And love, real love, never leaves. It simply grows into new forms, waiting to be found in laughter, in memories, in the faces of those who still love you." She closed the notebook, watching the sunlight shimmer across the lake. Somewhere, a group of children laughed in the distance. The sound made her smile. As she walked back toward the hotel, she felt light, almost youthful again. The same world that once felt lonely now felt full of promise. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she was ready for it. That night, sitting by her hotel window, she whispered into the still air, "I'm smiling, Thomas. Just like you wanted." The wind brushed against the curtains, carrying a faint, peaceful hush, as if the universe itself smiled back. And in that quiet moment, Evelyn Harper finally understood that love doesn't fade with time. It simply changes its home from one heart to another, from memory to life, from sorrow to peace.